Well, hi everyone. I want to welcome you to this week's Rough Cut, hosted by the MSU side of the Montana Institute on Ecosystems. I'm Julia Haggerty. I'm the interim director here at Montana State, and I'm really excited that you're all here today and also about our guests who will be presenting today. And before I introduce Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Maxell, I want to just remind you that next week we don't have a Rough Cut, but the following next week we have a rough cut, and then there's a gap, and then there are three more. And together, those four rough cuts feature our Yellowstone graduate scholars, and it's a really exciting lineup. And this talk next week is by Munib Rathor, who represents the Center for Biofilm Engineering. So I also need to just let you know that we record these webinars, and of course, the standard request to keep yourself on mute during the presentation would be great, and then we can use chat and open mics to have questions and answers at the end of the session, and Dr. Maxwell can tell us exactly how he wants to handle questions as we go. So it's my pleasure today to introduce Dr. Bryce Maxell and Dr. Jessica Mitchell. Dr. Maxell is the program coordinator at the Montana Natural Heritage Program. He has a really deep and exciting slate of experience and has been with the Natural Heritage Program since 2005 and holds a PhD in fish and wildlife biology from the University of Montana. Dr. Mitchell directs the Spatial Analysis Lab at U of M, and this program is closely coordinated with the Montana Natural Heritage Program, and we'll learn more about that. And she holds a master's degree in GIS science and a PhD in engineering and applied science from Idaho State. So with that, I'd like to welcome our speakers and excited to hear about this. This is the second presentation they've done to share the portfolio of activities and assets that they have that will be of great interest to Institute on Ecosystem scholars. So thanks so much for coming today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Julia. I really appreciate being invited to speak. I know Jessica feels the same way. I'm going to present today just a few slides and then spend the rest of our presentation on, at least my portion of the presentation, on our websites and give people a feel for what information is available on our websites. And then we'll turn it over to Jessica for the other half of the presentation. I'm going to share my screen here and hoping maybe one or more of you can let me know if you're seeing that okay.
Looks good.
Okay, great. So just to start with, to give you a little bit of background on our program, I am the program coordinator of the Montana Natural Heritage Program. The program is statutorily part of the Montana State Library and was put into statute in 1985. The main goal of that statute was to centralize information on flora, fauna, and biological communities of Montana, and then make that information available to everyone for environmental review, permitting, and planning processes. So it came out of the coal development debates in the 1970s, early 1980s. And then at the same time, the Nature Conservancy was establishing natural heritage programs across North America and also in South America. And so those two just came together at the right time, and the legislation was put through. So we are statutorily part of the state library, but the operation of the program has been under different, housed differently over the years. For a number of years, from 1985 to 2006, it was housed with the Nature Conservancy. And then from 2006 through this past year, all staff were housed out of the University of Montana. And then this past year, the State Library Commission had voted to have some of the staff come in and be directly administered by the State Library. So now we're a little bit of a hodgepodge, but I think we're all going to continue to provide seamless services. So we have some staff, mostly database, web management, administrative staff, housed at the State Library. We have Jessica at the Spatial Analysis Lab, who is part of the broader impact group at the University of Montana. And then we have a whole wetland and riparian mapping group that is, and they also do field assessments of wetlands and terrestrial communities. That is based at the O'Connor Center for the Rocky Mountain West, and that's the Ecological Mapping, Monitoring, and Analysis group out of the O'Connor Center. So again, just the message I want to get across is good collaboration between the State Library, University of Montana, and then also we collaborate. We are part of the NatureServe network, so all the heritage programs in North America and those that exist in South America are part of that NatureServe network. Here's just a map showing you all of the areas that have heritage programs in the Western Hemisphere, and showing you that they're just housed in different situations. Most commonly, university in yellow there, fish and game agencies in blue, and DNRCs, DEQs in red. So we are unique in terms of our housing or statute within the state library. Given all those different housing situations, we do things a little differently here and there, but we do manage taxonomy and conservation status ranks in a standard format. With our program, again, we are very focused on providing information for environmental review, permitting, and planning processes. So I'll just very quickly overview some of the information that we're serving up to meet those information needs. The land cover layer, which Jessica will talk to you about, our wetland and riparian mapping layer, which we are about 87% of the state complete. All the green there has modern NWI compatible wetland and riparian mapping completed. And then the dark blue areas are undergoing mapping right now, and the light blue areas there we're looking for money to finish off the state. In terms of individual plant and animal species information, if you kind of look at that upper left triangle, we manage basic information on individual taxa, and then distributional information and status information. On that larger triangle, you can see on the distribution side, we try to manage information on surveys, observations, element occurrences, which I'll go into a little bit more later, and then range polygons. And we're doing a lot of predicted habitat suitability modeling right now. A little deeper dive on that, we, in our databases right now, currently have about 3.1 million plant and animal observations, around 425,000 structured surveys. So that would be everything from a plot, a vegetation plot where all species are being inventoried, to maybe a bat mistnet session or a bird point count location. We're keeping track of that information in our surveys database. We have information right now in our database on 5,300 animal species, 5,900 botanical species, around 120 different communities. We're well represented on vertebrates, vascular plants. The weak areas are a variety of invertebrate groups, and actually we're pretty good on botanical species coverage at this point, with the exception of the macrofungi, the mushrooms. I was going to say a little bit more about that species of concern occurrence layer. We filter out observations that are associated mostly with reproduction or year-long presence of a population from all that underlying observation data. And then this is our main layer that we try to put out there for environmental review processes. And essentially, this is the checklist that we want people to say, hey, this species is documented in this area. Do I need to mitigate for my activities for this species in this process that I'm going through? Because so much of Montana, about 35% of Montana is public lands, but the remainder is private lands. We've undertaken a major effort in the last few years to create predicted habitat suitability models for all species. And so I will talk more about that and show you more of that. But the message I want to get across is that we are modeling every species in our database with the idea that not only will we have these individual models to fill in where we lack surveys, fill in information where we lack surveys, but also that we can create predicted biodiversity maps. So And I also wanted to say that NatureServe, our, again, sort of parent body of all the heritage programs, is also undergoing a major effort to model predicted habitat suitability of species across their entire range. So we're going to stick to the boundary of Montana, but NatureServe will partner with them to model across the entire range of species. Just want to check in. I've closed out my PowerPoint. I want to make sure people are seeing the website there before I go on.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I just want to spend a few minutes here in the remainder of my time kind of introducing you to our websites. Julie had mentioned this at the beginning when she introduced me, that we had done a presentation for the Rough Cut series about 2 years ago, Jessica and I had, and we were just really thrilled from the response of Institute on Ecosystems staff, and it was really clear to both of us and Bruce Maxwell and others that, wow, we really should be crosswalking a lot more. What happened then after that was a bunch of chaos on our side, and I know Bruce was doing that as well, and then COVID hit. So I guess what I wanted to do is alter my presentation a little bit more to show you the web resources that we have, the information resources that we have, and then to kind of put it in your head to say, hey, I'm working on this. I ultimately want this at resource managers' fingertips, and to see if there's other collaborations that we can put in the works in the future. So that's my goal in presenting to you today, is just to see if there's any other crosswalking that we can do. And I will say that on the agency level access side of our websites, where they're password protected, anybody at the university can get agency level access to our websites. And I'll show you where to do that when we get there. Today, I'm going to just go through 3 of our websites, and I'm primarily going to do that through our Natural Heritage Map Viewer. These are the data information summary tasks that we provide within our Map Viewer web application. And there's not nearly enough time. I usually give 2-hour trainings to agencies on this. So we're going to just give you a taste for what's available. But again, you can kind of see point observation data, single species overview data, where you can see everything we have: surveys, observations, range polygons, predicted habitat suitability models in that task, structured surveys, where have the surveys been performed of various types across the state, land cover summary, wetland riparian mapping summary, land management, and we try to bring that all together in this environmental summary task. And before I go on, I'll say these little question marks in each of these, if we open that up, link to a little description of each task, and you can download a how-to-use document for each task, so that you can self-serve. Again, I just want to give you a taste for this, and the best way to do that is to go through our environmental summary task, and we'll just run what is a typical environmental summary report that might go into an environmental review, permitting, or planning process. So we have a variety of map controls and filtering on the top and filtering menus on the left, but essentially we recommend filtering on species of concern for the most part, and then we can apply various geographic filters. So all of the data types that I've gone through so far and talked about, we've pre-summarized those by a variety of jurisdictions across the state. So if we want to summarize where is all the weed data for a particular county, we can pick the county filter. We can do that for a town, and it'll buffer around individual towns or cities. We can do that for a township, quad map, east and west of the Continental Divide. Again, all of our data we can summarize: FWP region, important bird areas, tribal boundaries, park boundaries. Let's try, today we'll go ahead and do maybe a watershed boundary. We'll pick a 10-digit code HUC here, and I'm just going to zoom in on Bozeman since you guys are familiar with the area. And I'm going to say, let's do an environmental summary for Bridger Creek. So we've picked Bridger Creek, and again, here are all those data types. If we open these folders up, we can see data summaries for all these different data types. Several different categories under native species. the species of concern occurrences. So those are again, the species of concern, the ones that are of greatest conservation concern. Any other observed species, potential species, that's where our predicted habitat suitability models come into play. Structured surveys, land cover, wetland riparian mapping, land management summary, biological reports, and invasive and pest species. So we can see summaries, and I'll take you on a quick tour of the species here. Again, this is our species of concern. So again, what we're trying to do is provide quickly a list of species that are either documented or potentially occur within this watershed. And then we can just go down this species list and look at all the information we have for them. So we'll start out just right at the top of the list here with Veery. If we open up Veery, then we can go to our other web resources. So if I click on Field Guide, I still have my environmental summary report tab open here on one web browser tab, but I now have another tab open to our Montana Field Guide that has information on individual species. So again, let's say you're a natural resource manager and you're a mammologist and you don't know anything about birds and you want to get a little more background on Veery. Well, you've got photos, you've got conservation and agency status ranks, you've got sounds, you've got general description, diagnostic characteristics, a range map for the state that you can toggle through, see migratory range versus summer range, hemispheric range maps, these observation maps, which say, okay, we have around 1,100 observations for Veery in our database. And it also says, this gives you a good idea of how we're sharing data with the general public. The field guide is open to the general public, whereas that environmental summary report that I'm going through is just agency level access. And again, just to point out, university employees can get access to that. And so this is a way of sort of balancing this gridded scale that you're seeing here. Each of these smaller rectangles is a quarter degree of latitude, longitude block. So that's essentially about the same size, that is the same size as 4 USGS quadrangle maps, those smaller rectangles that you're seeing on these maps. But it's a way of sharing data with the general public, and we haven't really had anyone say, why aren't you showing us the data? This generally meets all of the needs for the general public for everything, and it also protects sensitive information so that you don't have information on orchids or something out there that someone might be interested in collecting. We also summarize the data by season, by elevation, by time of year of that the observation was reported. We link across to our field guide on ecological systems to say what ecological systems is this species occasionally and commonly associated with, ecology, reproductive characteristics, and so on. So again, that's just one species that we've explored and one component of information. We can also look at our single species overview for this species. So this is another task within Map Viewer that we're opening up a new browser window on. I still got my master environmental summary report open on another browser tab. Let me turn off a map layer here to make this a little more transparent or visible. And now we can see all of our underlying data that we have for this particular species. So we've got our observations here in, I'll start with our surveys. You can see these survey transects of point counts in gray dots. On anything on the map, I can come up on our information button here and come down and click on any one of those records. And I'll open up the structured surveys. And we can see tabular data associated with that individual location. So that survey was done by the Avian Science Center Landbird Monitoring Program in 2003. It's got 150 meters of locational uncertainty associated with it. And yes, here's the list of species that they detected at that survey location. So you can see, again, what was detected at that survey location. Veery was not, so it's not showing up on this map. We could also look at tabular data associated with these individual observations in green or yellow. I won't go into that, but that's associated with why those colors are different, but that's associated with the Montana Bird Distribution book series. That is the long-standing way of summarizing data for birds in the state. We've also got these species of concern occurrences. So this is where Viri was detected with some level of certainty that they're breeding. And so we're, again, this whole polygonal area we've buffered by either the locational uncertainty or the home range size of the species. And we're saying any activities, environmental review, permitting, planning processes that are going on that intersect those polygons, we want you to consider that species in that process. We also have our predicted habitat suitability model output. So we have, again, I could go into a couple hours of detail on our modeling process, but we have low suitability habitat here in yellow, moderately suitable in orange, and optimal suitability in red. And again, we can see tabular data associated with any one of those. I'll go back to the environmental summary report. We could link out to range maps, which is going to be in the field guide, our predicted habitat suitability models, which will give you typically a 14 to 17 page write-up on the modeling process for that species, how well the model's performed and whatnot. The associated habitats that you would find in the field guide. And then over here, I just wanted to note that we summarize that graphically, the predicted habitat suitability model output. I'll close Viri down there so we can see this a little more clearly. We have sorted the species that are documented in this area with species of concern occurrences by how much of that watershed is either optimal, moderate, or low suitability. So you can see as you're going down the list here, the species at the top are predicted to have a larger portion of that landscape as optimal or moderately suitable habitat, and those drop out. We don't have models in place for some species. Again, that would be on the species side of things. Let me show you, we've just added invasive species the last year or two. Actually, since fall of 2017, we started work on invasive species. And again, in this case, we've got numbers of observations for each of these invasive species. We also have predicted, in this case, landscape risk of invasion for these species that is sorted in the same way I talked about above. And something that we coordinators might want to do, for instance, is, well, I've got this information for the upper Bridger watershed. Let me just click a watershed over to Smith Creek. And now I've got my documented and potential invasive species list for that watershed just that quickly. So those are basically what I wanted to show you for within our map viewer application, given the time available. We are undertaking a major effort to enter all theses and dissertations into our database, get all of that underlying data from them into our database, and we are geo-referencing those as we go, so that the idea is here that we have some of these reports that are associated with underlying observation data that are starting to show up on these on our report here. But in the future, we want someone to be able to draw a polygon on the landscape anywhere in Montana and get a full list of everything from an agency report to a undergraduate thesis to a dissertation to a journal publication from that area. So that is an underdeveloped report there on that biological reports, but you can kind of see the vision that we're shooting for moving forward. I want to very quickly, with my just last remaining minute or two, go over to our Montana field guide and talk about the different types of field guides we offer. When someone runs an environmental summary report for those environmental review, permitting, or planning processes, not only are they going to get those list of species in that report that they download, but they will also get accompanying field guides for every species on that list as a PDF. So we have, as I was going through, individual accounts for individual species, but we also have the ability to download information. So we have field guides for animals, plants, fungi, ecological systems, and invasive and pest species. So let's say we wanted to get information on aquatic invasive species for the state. At that level of the field guide, I can download a PDF that says, here is maybe not the full account that we have in the online field guide, but this would be something I could hand out to my summer field crews or or take it into the field with me as I'm evaluating a local site, and I'll get a 1 or 2 3-pager on each species, each aquatic invasive species in this case. Let's go back out. I want to show you one last thing, and I'll turn it over to Jessica. I want to show you our species snapshot site, which is the field guide and the species snapshot are totally open to the public. Anybody can access them. This is a quick way of generating information on what species occur in your area. So let's go county, and we'll go down to Gallatin County, and maybe we'll say I want a list of all plant species in Gallatin County, and I want just the species of concern, and we'll submit that query. So I got 40 plant species of concern in Gallatin County that are vascular plants, 1 bryophyte or moss. And then I can look at information. Again, the general public can see this. They can see how many observations in Gallatin County for the species of concern occurrences. They could view the model output. They could go to the field guide. Or the last thing that I want to end up on here is they could quickly download a custom field guide or Excel spreadsheet of that list of species. So now we've got a custom field guide that they can put on their iPhone, their iPad, whatever, go on a hike, and they would have this 1-pager account of species that they can go through if they're offline, for instance. And with that, I know it's a little bit of a fire hose treatment here, but I want to turn it over to Jessica, and then we'll answer questions at the end as a collective. So again, the main thing here is for those of you who might have joined a little late, I'm trying to give you a flavor for the information we provide, and just reach out to you to say, is there information that you're working on that you would like to get at the fingertips of managers that kind of fit within our framework, or maybe propose to us expanding our framework? I'm actually seeing Mike Ivey there, and he worked with us on helping us get Bombus bumblebee information into our system that they had gathered, but now it's represented in those environmental summary reports. So we've got, bumblebee representation in all those environmental review processes going on. So that's the kind of example that I'm talking about. Jessica, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Bryce. Oops. 1 second here. Okay, is everyone seeing PowerPoint screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So as Bryce mentioned, land cover, just wanted to get a little bit more specific about what land cover we're talking about. We're talking about a statewide land cover layer that's one of 15 geographic databases or geodatabase frameworks that is administered and governed by the Montana Land Information Advisory Council. And each of these layers has a landing page. So this is a good place to take a look at descriptions of land use, land cover mapping, both historically, currently, and what we are in the midst of revising right now. Right here is where we're making available for download a preliminary, we're calling it 2020. That's when we started this comprehensive revision for this Montana land cover data set. If you go over to the map viewer, you'll find that we have not taken this updated land cover version and yet and migrated everything over to the map viewer framework. But this is about to happen probably after April 6th and between April 6th and May 1st. And so there's this connection here, as Bryce mentioned, if we're looking at environmental summary reports, for example, we can walk through and click under each type of ecological system and see a crosswalk to the field guide. So this is part of the downstream application of land cover that we'll be updating. The plan for our comprehensive revisions is captured in a Montana land cover plan. It is being presented to the MLEAC Commission April 5th. And so I'd like to invite you to take a look and provide reviews and comments. Excuse me, the meeting itself is April 6th, and I'm looking for comments by April 5th. And that could be anything that you just catch or think about here today, or if you care to dig into the plan itself, any sort of comments would be appreciated. Some of the resources that we're building out right now is a story map. And so if you're looking for a comprehensive description of what's been going on historically with land cover mapping, as well as meetings with our land cover working group and other products and resources we're building out right now, this is a good place where we have all of these tools localized. And then if you're interested in any of the materials or presentations that have been compiled in our working groups, we've met 3 times as a working group, and we'll be meeting probably around April, sending out a scheduling poll soon. If you're interested in participating in the working groups or accessing materials, there's a link here to a CUBES hub site that we have. And in the framework I begin to talk about, I want to say, a big part of this has been identifying what is out there with mapping besides a broad brush biological communities mapping layer that's statewide. And what we have been hearing, one is there's a critical need for taking a closer look at sage, grass, and level of invasion. And so we have formed a subgroup on rangelands and invasive species to address some of these critical needs from the perspective of land managers. There's been a huge response for a need for time series products and the ability to track trends in ecological systems over time. And then again, interest in coarse resolution mapping that we're talking about here today, but also higher resolution mapping that may speak to specific themes, and I'll get into that a bit more. We've been working with some USGS land cover change products as part of the working group, and their response in terms of suggestions is that latency is important, so we're working hard to think about how to provide systematic biannual or even quarterly updates to our mapping products. We also have a wealth of field data that we want to be taking into consideration in terms of end user or participant citizen science types of input, as well as taking a look at the more densely populated network of occurrence data and plot data that we have in the state that might boost our assessment, at least of areas where we may be more uncertain of what's going on the ground, to give users a sense of likelihood that the habitats that we're looking at and framing with species occurrence is accurate. We've also gotten feedback on the story map being a helpful communication tool. And then, as I've been saying, we're looking at how to address some of our downstream applications, specifically with the Heritage Program, their map viewer and their field guide accounts. If you look up in the upper left-hand side, this is what you will see if you download land cover right now. These are land cover layers, all with a base map based on Landsat imagery around 2000 and annual updates to fire boundaries, transportation, and agriculture. We are envisioning a new framework that is somewhat more dynamic and flexible. We're updating our base map so that it's based on Landsat imagery from 2016. This is using a Landfire remap product for existing vegetation types. So pretty much all the classes that you're seeing now in the field guide will remain the same. In addition, we're looking at providing to users other landfire remap products that are available, which include things like environmental site potential, some of the biophysical settings, and then places where LiDAR has been incorporated, and we can look at things like vegetation height and cover. Some of the higher resolution single theme products that I mentioned could be projects that folks are working on specifically for invasive species mapping, shrub cover, woody encroachment, irrigated lands. And there's a lot of work going on throughout the state on particular single theme products. And so it would be great to learn about projects that are going on at MSU and potentially adopting some of these products into a larger geodatabase that we can make available through the library. And then I'll introduce you to two platforms we have under development to address some of the needs related to tracking land cover changes over time and characterizing trends in the health and the status of different ecological systems. I'll give you a quick screenshot of some of these tools, and then if we have time, I'll try to demo a few for you. We've worked under some seed grant funding with the NRCS and the state library to develop an ecological site reviewer tool that contains our preliminary new land cover mapping and our existing land cover mapping. We have the ability for working group members and the public to take a look at how this new product is looking, and to actually submit some suggestions via form. So in the long term, we're sort of envisioning this as a container where we can provide plot and field data throughout the state. And if we have individual mapping products that might be for a specific project area, but we can contribute that information, we would like to also try to fold in or contain some of those higher resolution mapping products too, and make those available. One of the time series platforms we're using is an ArcGIS Online. And right now we have looked at putting into and are testing out agricultural land use change from the Department of Revenue final land unit classification maps. And this right now we have in the system 2009 through 2020. We're also building into this the USGS LC map products that are showing annual change detection. Then we have also built out a Google Earth Engine platform. Right now, it's sort of just in a stage for bringing in some raster time series data sets and beginning to understand how we can visualize trends over time that might be informative for things like ranking ecological systems in terms of conservation priorities. And I'll show a demo of that too. I also wanted to bring to your attention not just the land cover MSDI layer, but under elevation, you'll find that the state has been working on acquiring LiDAR data across the state through a USGS 3DEP program. So if you're interested in taking a look at what has been acquired or is in the process of being acquired, what quality level, who's interested in acquiring new LiDAR data in other areas, there's a Collaborate Submit Areas of Interest tab here as well. Some of these tiles, for example, over in the Valley County area, have been acquired at a quality level 1, which means there's a pretty dense point cloud density, about 8 returns per meter squared. And so we'll be working on trying to derive some vegetation products, not just canopy height, but things like canopy roughness, what's going on in the mid canopy level, and so forth, as a demonstration. And some training on processing those point cloud returns is being put together in a tutorial that will be presented at MAGIP. That's on the 6th of April, 8 a.m. It's using ArcGIS Pro, and all those materials will be made available online through our website as well. And while I still have some slides up, I'll just quickly run through a few of the other projects in Montana that our lab has been working on. Most recently, we have been working quite a bit on mapping annual invasive grasses with various types of sensors and doing some cross-sensor comparisons. For example, comparisons between WorldView 3 and Sentinel-2. You can see just visually the differences with pixel resolution here. And some of the story that we walk away with is in places where we, for example, have treated cheatgrass in consecutive years, we're being able to pick up indicators of treatment success after about 2 years from Sentinel-2 time series imagery. Another project that we have going on that we are actually beginning to collaborate with the MSU Spatial Sciences Center on is the mapping of Ventenata on Crow tribal lands. So we've had a year of intensive field data collection. We'll be collecting data again this summer, as well as we have there's an MSU grad student who will be taking a close look at treatments and treatment responses, both chemical and prescribed fire. We're using 2 years of subscriptions with Planetscope. So this is sort of an up and coming group that has constellations of small satellites where they're able to actually acquire high resolution imagery daily. That's composited weekly. So we're getting a good chance at cloud-free scenes, which is sometimes hard to come by in the state. And there's actually a complete dashboard where this huge amount of information is being served up through an API. There's direct connections to ArcGIS Pro. So we're finding a lot of time savings and advantages to the commercial imagery. You know, it costs money, but there are some advantages we're finding to this. We're beginning the task of looking at places where we have high probabilities of Ventenata presence with respect to very complicated checkerboard of land management, grazing allotment issues here. Another area that we've been working in is the detection of canopy chemistry for sagebrush and interactions between that chemistry and herbivory. So there's a link here to a paper that's coming out and a thesis. Now I'll jump over to a few minutes of demo. Is everyone seeing a web browser now?
We can.
Okay, so just a recap here. If you're interested in any of the MSDI spatial data infrastructure, that is layers, that's accessible through the state library. If you were interested in, for example, the LiDAR, you'll find that under elevation. And the land cover will take you to the cover page I referenced. There's some information about our working group, a link to our land cover story map, and then a place for downloading our preliminary data set. And then also some of the other tools that we have, such as the Ecological Site Reviewer application. This is an example in Map Viewer of how the land cover layer plays out. If you were to generate, as Bryce introduced, an environmental summary report under the land cover component, you would get calculations on the percent for this area I delineated right here, occupied by forest and woodland systems, and then a breakdown of higher level classes within that forest and woodland system. What percent is human land use developed in agriculture? And then how much are we within this area of interest looking at ecological systems that are shrubland, steppe and savanna, grassland, and wetland riparian. And so for any of these classes, you can actually go in and look at descriptions of each land cover type or habitat. And so as we to update our land cover layer, we'll be taking a closer look at the field guide and the ecological system units that are in here, and if there are any updates we might want to be making. Post these links for you in the chat as soon as I wrap up. So here is our land cover story map. We have introduction to land cover in the state, a breakdown and a primer on land cover classifications. There are two major national classifications, a national vegetation classification or NVC, and an ecological systems of the US. What you see in the field guide is a Montana version of the ecological systems of the US. There's information on what's been on the agenda with the working group. There are a number of products we've evaluated, for example, and there's links to that information. And then for example, with end user input, there's actually a separate tab that houses the ecological site reviewer, which is also loaded here, and I'll show you. If you wanted to make comparisons between our existing land cover and the new land cover that we're working on right now, you can see with the swipe tool changes that are going on at the surface or areas where we might be picking up inconsistencies that could be classification errors that we want to take a look at, particularly any type of systematic errors that are going on. The container that we have for user contributed input can be accessed under the layer list by checking on edit suggestions, and it's through here and this edit tool that you are able to, for example, say, oh, I've just been out over here. I've taken some pictures and I documented this isn't the landscape that I'm seeing on this land cover map. And then you could pick that information and you could provide your name and email address, a description. And there's also opportunities here to upload photo documentation. The longer term vision for this is to expand it into more of a citizen science initiative where we have what's called a georeference PDF map that can be actually just loaded up into a tablet or a phone. And as you're driving around, you can physically look at what land cover class you should be located in, with links to the field guide and the descriptions of those systems and the ability to send in comments and add photos. And then again, bringing in the field work at point and perhaps plot scales. And then some of the mapping, for example, that we've done with Fish and Wildlife Service for cheatgrass and the centennials. This could be a hosting location. Some of the time series that we're beginning to populate is one, as I mentioned, the ArcGIS online mapping. Right now we have 5-meter resolution agricultural data in here. Right now it's 2009 through to 2020. And so this provides an animation of some land use change, for example, that's occurring the Bozeman area. So you can look for places where with this bright chartreuse green, places where the irrigation, if irrigation is turned on and off, places where we have fallow lands and crops, and as they disappear, that could be conversion into residential development, for example. This is also where we will be populating the LCMAP products, the USGS land cover annual change products. And in this Google Earth Engine platform, we're just now playing around with the idea of being able to generate time series charts. And the inputs we have are just, you know, your typical NDVI from Landsat time series. And then we've also gone and for each, I want to say actually for each basin, we have developed a Tessel cap, brightness, greenness, wetness. And there's the opportunity to summarize these changes over time by different objects, point, rectangle, polygon. But if you click feature, there actually is some preloaded features that you can choose from, ecoregions, HUC watersheds, right now county boundaries. And then we're looking at trying to incorporate the land cover classes themselves. So this is sort of a tool for visualizing how to perform some calculations over time that are meaningful. For the time being, for example, with over here, I just clicked on this sub basin and I'm looking at changes in brightness, greenness, wetness over time. As you would expect in, you know, peak snowfall each year around January, you're seeing a great deal of brightness from the snowpack. And then of course, wetness from the snow cover, and then greenness is the inverse because we don't have any grass, for example, growing. And this tracks throughout the growing season. So you can see areas where you may be in drought or where you have peak green up. And if this is a condition that's changing over time, we should be able to look at a long-term trend that way. So this is just one example of visualization. And I think I'll stop there so we have some time for questions.
Hey, thanks so much, Jessica and Bryce. This is just amazing. And I'm looking forward to sharing. It's so great that we have this video recorded because I definitely think it's important for those of us representing different departments on campus to remind our colleagues and grad students of, you know, all the content that's here. There were a couple of questions that came up in the chat that Bryce answered. I don't know if you want to elaborate on those, Bryce. And, you know, we've got a small group, so I just encourage people to take themselves off mute and go ahead and weigh in.
Sure, I can add a little bit more to that and just say that we would love to incorporate any undergrad, grad, PI research data into our system, surveys, detections, on the individual animal and plant basis, just to, again, get it at people's fingertips. I know that was one thing, you know, there's the concept in getting our publications out the door so that hopefully those broader messages are filtering down to resource managers, but there's the individual observation data that and survey data that might very well inform local decisions. So yeah, we'd like to centralize that. And just by way of encouragement on that front, we have about 2,000 agency resource managers that have Map Bureau accounts that are, you know, they're digging into this application and viewing data on the landscape. And then the field guide itself gets about, we're up to 77 hours of use on the average day. So every single day, 77 hours of use. So if you want your information available and to make a difference, it's a great way to do that. So.
This is Kathy Cripps. I have a question for Bryce. I'm out here on my back porch.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. A couple years ago, someone contacted me. I'm a mycologist about the macrofungi, and then I haven't heard anything in a couple years. Do you know where that's at, or if
Yeah,
I lost my contacts?
Yep, I'm sure that was Andrea Pipp, our botany program manager.
That
Yep.
was it.
And it is on our to-do list. And like I said, in the botany world, we're doing pretty well in terms of species representation. Like we have 1,205 diatoms in our data system, and working really closely, with the diatom experts in the state. We got great representation for lichens, bryophytes, obviously vascular plants. Macrofungi is our true missing group there, so it's very high on our priority list. So yeah, we'll definitely be getting in touch with you. And I would say, just in general, this is to you and maybe others, but for instance, when we were getting our lichen list up to date, we had Tim Wheeler help us out on that, and he was actually sort of between jobs, so we hired him for 3 months to help get that information out there. And we could do the same for, let's say you've got a postdoc that needs bridge funding for a month or two. We could have them write accounts for the Montana Field Guide to help fill in that space for them. Or if you've got a great, fabulous undergrad or master's student, we potentially could do that too. In the case of master students, maybe we could provide, the RA support that would help get them through the semester to help write field guide accounts. So just to throw out some ideas.
Okay, and Tim Wheeler would be a good help on the fungi as well.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And Kathy, I apologize. I didn't have your name in mind, but I knew it was Tim and someone else. So you must have been that someone else.
I'm someone else. So I'll just wait till someone contacts me again. I just didn't know what to do next.
Yep. We are, Andrea is very busy right now working on a statewide plant conservation strategy.
Okay.
We are trying to get that summarized so that we can get plants and invertebrates actually into the next wildlife action plan that gets funded by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And if we get plants and invertebrates in there, then that can allow funding to flow, federal Fish and Wildlife Service funding to flow into the state for those groups. So as soon as she's done with that, we should be able to get back to the macrofungi.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm in no hurry.
Okay.
I've got plenty to do. So yeah, I just wondered where it went. Thank you.
Hi, this is Rob Payne. I'm a hydrologist here at Montana State. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I know little to nothing about organismal biology, but I do dabble a bit in data management and dealing with large data sets, that sort of thing. And I was just curious if you have an API to this database that would allow a researcher to do more extensive synthetic work across the data that you have.
Not an API, and the main reason for that is you might have caught a portion of the presentation there where I was talking about that balancing act of how do we provide information in a generalized format so that every citizen in Montana out there has access to it, but we're not revealing sensitive species information. That said, that's on the just free for all web access. However, anybody who wants to at any point in time can put in a data request with us, and we will send them a geodatabase of any of our information. That surveys, wetland mapping, observations, our predicted habitat suitability models, all of that we can send you in a geodatabase. And we also have a whole list of people who get those geodatabases because they are GIS savvy every 3 months, every 6 months, once a year. So we could put you on a recurring list. You wouldn't even have to ask us again. We'll just ship you out a new geodatabase when the calendar date hits.
Super. I just say as a reminder, and probably you already know this, Bryce and Jessica, but the IOE maintains a really large mailing list. So if there are things that are good to get out to constituent scholars and students and agency partners, next week when I send out an email just on the MSU campus, I'll remind them about the land cover report, scoping exercise. And, we're happy to help be an information sharing bridge.
Wonderful
area.
That's great to hear.
And this recording, it might take us a couple of days to get online, but I think it's a great resource that we can point people towards. So we'll certainly do that. Any last questions before we wrap up for the hour? Well, hearing none, I really appreciate both of you for taking the time to put together such an excellent presentation, and excited to make sure people are fully aware of this amazing set of resources that we have here. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.